You're very welcome. Representing the state of Washington is Tom Loranger, a deputy director at the Department of Ecology. I've spent 16 years working and living in the state of Washington, and I can tell you from my own personal experience that when I hear the name Department of Ecology, I think stewardship, professionalism. This is an organization that I think at even a national level is known for its water stewardship. The people that I've worked with one-on-one in community development issues have consistently been about solutions and best practices. So it's a real privilege to me that we have this opportunity to hear from Tom, who is Deputy Director of their Water Resources Program. Tom's worked in waste management and water resources for over 20 years. He knows his business. He's the right person to represent the state. He's also a Cougar fan for you WSU folks and an avid triathlete. Let's welcome Tom Loranger.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate the intro. Yeah, actually, I came in from Olympia today, and I haven't been on campus for several years. I spent 5 semesters there, and it was just a real treat. That campus is just looking great. And I want to thank Paul Kimmel and John Kimmerling. They are recognized within the Palouse as leaders in bringing people together, and they're also recognized outside of the Palouse. Really appreciate the work you guys are doing. I also want to call out ecology, one of my colleagues here, Guy Gregory. Raise your hand, Guy. Guy will be answering all the questions. No, Guy is a geologist and a hydrogeologist. He's your primary face down here in the Palouse. And he's worked all over the West in his career. He's got passion for his work. He's got commitment. He knows a heck of a lot about the issues in the Palouse and other parts of Eastern Washington. We actually had him in Olympia 15 years ago for 1 year, 8 months, 10 days, and that was it. He came. This is his place. He came back, and we're lucky to have him here. And again, so Department of Ecology is a little different in that the Water Resources Program is within the Department of Ecology, Washington State Department of Ecology. And, of course, we do adjudications and well construction oversight and dam safety, but primarily I think of our core work as we're caught in this dynamic tension between allocating water and protecting groundwater and flows. So it's a very dynamic business, always interesting, sometimes really frustrating. It's a tough business with lots of disagreement. I want to just take my time to give you a few legislative highlights and then talk about some partnerships and conservation around the state. First of all, quickly, budget. I know Maya, my boss, was here last year and she talked about it. We had 3 years ago, the heyday, we had 166 FTEs. We're down to 128 right now, so over 30 FTE reduction. A lot of competition. We are funded from the state general fund, so we're in direct competition with K through 12 education, nursing homes, and it's looking like there'll be $1 billion shortfall for the next biennium, so we could be reduced again. But in the meantime, what we're trying to do is really focus on our work, identifying our core work, doing it well, and communicating it well to the legislature. For example, we're working on a change right now near Kennewick, and it's going to result in irrigation of 1,700 acres of vineyard property, which has an increased value to the state of Washington of $75 million. So just getting those stories out. So legislative initiative. So when Maya was here last year, she talked about Water Smart Washington. We were given a piece of legislation. They said, go take a look at your programs, make them more efficient, and then propose a funding source. So we did that. Wasn't a good year to start proposing new fees. Didn't go anywhere. What we got from the legislature instead was a proviso in 2011, and what they told us was, go out and do studies and demonstrate to us that you guys are operating efficiently. Do performance review studies. And we were selected, 3 processes in the state of Washington were selected to work with Boeing on their lean project, and we were one. And lean is not an acronym. It means not fat. Get rid of the waste. So that was one part of the proviso. The other part was make 500 decisions, water right decisions. And if you don't, we'll take away $500,000 from your budget. So pressure was on. In regard to the lien work, it's right now the two candidates for governor for the state of Washington are both talking about lean. It's a kind of work that Toyota pioneered, and Boeing does quite a bit of it. So the way it works is it's called value stream mapping, where you get people that do the work, in this case administering water rights from all over the state. We had a group of about 8 people, some customers outside the agency that we work with. You go in a room and you basically lock yourself away for 5 days and report out at the end of it. And we did that with Boeing as a facilitator. And what you end up with is a wall with stickies that lay out what the process is. And even with, it took everyone in the room to really understand what the process was. Everyone knew pieces of it. And so you have a whole wall full of stickies that show before different colors for the different people that work on it, different roles, feedbacks to databases that are used, and you identify steps that are not value added. And then you have the change, the finished side right here, and you report out to your top management, your executives on the last day of the week. And they nod their head and go, oh, okay, let's do that. And it's what's interesting about it, very painful, a lot of suffering, a lot of frayed people, but in the end, you have consensus. And when the managers, the director of the agency comes in and looks at it, what can they say? With all this laid out, these guys obviously know what they're talking about because they spent all this time with it. So just to mention a few process improvements, we've adopted an electronic routing system to make contracts a lot more efficient, an RSS feed system so that applicants, call it really simple syndicates, so applicants people are interested to know when applications come in, don't have to wait for a mail out, they get it automatically sent to their email. Updated our website, improved forms, improved the customer contact process so people have better expectation about what's in the backlog, and a more effective sub-basin approach for how we process water rights, and a better communication plan, as Gary said when he was up here a few minutes ago, just so we can communicate with people. Tough choices. A lot of the applications, the backlogs will be denials. We need to be upfront about that and communicate that better. So upshot, we exceeded our 500. We made 800 decisions last year, so we met the goal, reduced the backlog down to 6,600. So I'm hoping that with this ledge session, we can say we proved up. You gave us this task, we did it. Keep funding us. We've got more good work to do. So that was 2011. 2012, we were expecting another proviso that said make 500 decisions again. Didn't get it, which is good. So maybe a little more confidence there. And so there was two legislative initiatives that affected us. One ties into conservation. As you know, the water code is pretty clunky. It was pretty effective for settling the West, protecting your homestead, protecting your mining claim. But not very good at encouraging conservation. So one legislative change we got is when someone applies to change their water right, goes into the change queue, it's not subject to relinquishment. The idea that if you don't use a water right for 5 years, it reverts back to the public. So the idea is now, if it's in the change queue, you don't have to keep using it and wait for ecology to process it. You can quit using it and not lose it. Encourages conservation. One piece. Second piece was Skagit, so so-called Skagit proviso, where $2.25 million was given to us to solve a water shortage issue in the Skagit. What we do is we set flows, and we often have reserves with flows to limit domestic use, how much new use going forward there will be. And in this case, the reserves ran out. There's people that want to put wells in. They have properties in a few subbasins. Very upset, so they've sued us. The Department of Ecology. On the other hand, the Sonoma's tribe is saying, hey, you guys, you shouldn't have put those reserves in there because you set those flows knowing that you've got endangered fish, you've got tribal reserved water rights. Those we don't believe that you have authority to establish reserves for future wells knowing the limitations of the resource. That's pending in front of the Court of Appeals right now too. So we're getting, the tension from both sides. And I think the model for this Skagit, like, okay, ecology, here's $2 million, solve this problem, kind of came from the Office of Columbia River project, where there's a big reservoir, Lake Roosevelt, and we got funding to investigate that and change the reservoir management to produce more water. So with a reservoir, it's much easier to produce water and improve flows because you can draft the reservoir down by a foot. In this case, no such situation, so we're really struggling to figure out, oh gosh, if we have a utility, put a line into these rural areas, $1 million a mile, how many properties again? A deep well that maybe, put a deep well in that maybe will not impact the streams. Pretty complicated analysis. Do people really believe it? Finding water rights, using rainwater. So we're working all these options through. The challenge is, and this ties back into the partnership piece, the challenge is, in the Skagit, it's a poster child for people not getting along. In fact, not just antagonistic is a very fair statement. Tribe, county, property owners, missives in the newspaper, and so it's a difficult environment to work in. So if you have that approach, if it ends up in the courts, it's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to take a lot of time. People don't stop at the Superior Court anymore. They go beyond that. You don't know what the outcome is. So I just want to come back to that theme about partnerships. From what I've seen, it is really the only way to go on some of these tough water issues. And I want to mention, just sagging into the partnerships, good partnership examples, a couple of them in the state. Start with the Palouse Basin Aquifer Committee, from the director of the Department of Ecology, from the Water Resources Program Manager, Maya Bellin, the director, Ted Stewart of it. I want to say thank you. Thank you for three things. Thank you for understanding that our future is tied together by shared geography, shared hydrology, irrespective of county, city, state lines. Thank you for investing the time over the years to talk to each other. Sometimes it's hard. It slows things down or appears to slow things down. You have to hear other people's points of views. Thank you for that. And thank you for what you've accomplished. I read the 2010 report. I haven't looked at the 2011 report yet. University of Idaho, WSU, Moscow, Pullman, real accomplishments, real reduction in use of water that provides certainty for the community, for future generations. All good. So that's my first example of working together and successes. Second one would be the Dungeness. We've spent a lot of time in the Dungeness on the Olympic Peninsula. Here's the situation where listed species, tribal reserve water rights, all the water has been allocated for the irrigators. Lots of time invested. We have come up with water for sale from conserved water from the irrigators. A lot of work, but a good success story. What's one of the things that's interesting about it is they've seen the Skagit example where the legislature appropriated $2 million to find water. So now legislators with interest in this in the Dungeness are saying, oh, okay, so in the future, water is fully appropriated. That means even new exempt wells will have to mitigate. They'll have to pay for mitigation. Can the legislature give them some money to do that? That happened in the Skagit. Really interesting policy discussion around that. So the idea that I have to pay for mitigation for my new well, what? I just put a well in, I have to pay for mitigation? Yeah, because you're taking someone else's water, but here, at least we have it for you. Legislature picks up the tab. Then meanwhile, the city of Sequim would say, well, wait a minute. Well, people in the urban growth area, they pay us a fee every month to use it. Don't you want to encourage people in the urban growth area and not new wells in rural areas? Another well, another source of contamination. Really interesting policy discussion right now about how that should play out. And then a few other examples would be for partnerships would be Walla Walla. They had the pilot project, pilot legislation, flexibility for flows. They've had real successes in improving flows in the streams, just like in the Dungeness, more water in stream. Cowlitz-Wahkiakum County, we're making good work on an in-stream flow program that divides up how much for in-stream use, how much for out-stream use. But it seems like in all these, there's continued dialogue about what we should do. So maybe just the last thing, I know we need to get on with the program, is just a few words on conservation. I'm learning about conservation. I know there was a new municipal efficiency standards established in 2003 in Washington State. what's fascinating is if you look at the big users on the west side, you look at Cascade Water Alliance, that has got Skyway, Tukwila, Bellevue, Issaquah, Sammamish Plateau, Redmond. If you look at their water use since 1990, as the population has gone up, the water use has gone down, not just per capita, but overall water use. And they still believe there's a lot more capacity to reduce water, much like some of the charts we were looking at today. Same thing with Seattle Public Utility, Bothell, Duval, 40% reduction in use over since like the 1990s. So per capita use on the west side is calmly down to around 85 gallons a person, which is quite good. So also we've got 20 reclaimed water facilities in the state of Washington right now too. So potential for more of that approach with funding and investments using reclaimed water over again. So big success on that. So maybe I'll just close here and leave it open for questions. And I just had a couple notes. Here's what Evan Scheffel is our alleged liaison. He's up there with the legislators all the time. And what I've heard him say more than once is water is hard. That's the first thing he says when he starts getting into these issues. Water is hard. What I've seen in my time here, partnerships are difficult, but resultant successes, and you here are just absolute leaders in that area. We're going to continue at the department to be as efficient as possible, try to focus on giving these FTEs what's our real work, and let's keep telling people about what we do, how it's in their interests, and if it's not, make the course corrections we need to. And then on conservation, I'm a neophyte on that. It's just from what I've seen, there's a lot of capacity left all over the state for conservation. It's in many cases, it's the cheapest way to get more water and secure more water for the future. That would be it. So any questions, I'd be happy to take.
Questions for Tom? Yes, sir.
So one of the biggest barriers in Washington to conservation is the use it or lose it law. And do you see any movement or any the legislature to kind of correct that or do something about that? Because the growers I talk to, they're like, well, I'm not going to conserve because I'll lose my water rights. So
yeah. So the one example I gave was the change provision that is now an exception to relinquishment. So that was a piece that encourages conservation. We've put proposals together year after year that have gone nowhere. There are existing interests that seem to be happy with the way things work. I don't know, but more people understand it, so I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that there's something. I just can't. It's hard to know what the legislature will do the next few years. But thank you for the question.